Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you. I hope you guys are, getting logged on, getting started up. I'm going to wait for just a few more seconds, just let people start getting on, getting set up, then we'll get started. I have to let you know, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments right now while we're waiting. If, you've thought of anything from last week that you want to bring up that has changed you over just thinking about the intro to Judges over this past week. For me, I have been thinking on it, and Judges is such a difficult chapter of the Bible, a difficult book of the Bible, because it is very much a time in which we see the wrath of God, the anger of God, when we turn to evil ways. It is something that I struggle with, and hopefully, when we walk through this, we will get through this struggle and learn why it's important to study Judges, why it is important to have it in the Bible, why we don't just avoid this part of God, this part of our story, of our history. So, we're going to get started. First of all, thank you for coming. If you aren't here, I hope you guys are tuning in later after this is uploaded, and are just getting to see the chat and getting to see us communicate. Make sure that you comment below this video if you have anything that you would have put in the chat or you wanted to let me know, and I'll try to comment back to you. So we are getting started in chapter 3 of Judges. So last week, if you haven't checked it out, we did the intro to Judges. We covered chapter 1 and chapter 2, where we learned what is Judges. Like, what did this book start with? What is it about? And what are Judges in and of themselves? And that kind of is reiterated in this beginning chapter 3 of Judges, which I recommend you turn to in whatever form possible. Pull up a side tab on your computer. I'm doing it on my phone right here. I also have my Bible out in case you want to get your Bible out. I'm reading New International Version of the Bible. It doesn't really matter too much because the story is the same. The wording might be off, but the story is the same. So in Judges 3, at the very beginning, the first 6 verses, we're kind of getting this reiteration of chapters 1 and 2, where we realize that the Israelites have angered God because God made a promise to them and they made a promise to God. God would give them the promised land, but they have to drive out those people that would turn them away from God, turn them to evil ways, to other gods, to false gods. But they opted not to. After a generational transition where Joshua and the leaders of the Israelites that were in the promised land or with Moses and saw the commandments, saw the miracles of God, understood that was God acting upon their lives, they're gone. And so these Israelites are starting to turn away from what they need to do. And they've left these groups of people in the promised lands that they didn't drive out as they promised God. And if you look at Judges 3, chapter 4, these people, they were left, and God used them to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's commands, which he had given the ancestors through Moses. The commandments, among other things, but mostly the 10 Commandments Moses was given to follow all of those. And then we're going to continue reading chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. The Israelites lived among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. They took their daughters in marriage and gave their own daughters to their sons and served their gods. So now we're getting into the instant of the Israelites turning into these evil ways, these false ways, these false teachings away from God, the one true God. And now we're going to get into the rest of chapter 3. We are starting in on our judges. So chapter 3 encompasses our first 3 judges: Othniel, Ehud, and Shamgar. So each of these judges are the first 3 judges. And we're discussing them all together because they have very specific stories, or there's not a ton of information about them from these stories for us to, do a whole lesson on them. But that doesn't mean they're not important. That doesn't mean you can't take something out of this. So I want you to make sure you're focusing, even as we do all 3 of them, to pick out points that resonate with you, that make you understand why these guys were judges in the first place. I mean, they led Israelites, but how? So we're going to start with Othniel. Othniel was sent by God, chosen by God. Why? We start in verse 7. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs. Now, the Baals and the Asherahs, these are both false gods. Baal is mentioned throughout the Bible several times. It's one of the more prominent ones mentioned in the Bible, I think. And this is God is normally depicted in a cow statue. We hear about, the golden cow statues, or the golden cow, or Baal, the golden ball, Baal. That is that God, false God. Asherah, also a false God. This I looked up because I didn't know. It is normally a tree or a post that is carved, that depicts a pagan earth goddess. And this goddess is what you're actually praying to, but you're praying to these idols that represent these false gods that are not the God, our God, the Bible's God. And so, continuing to verse 8, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. This angered him. This is the second commandment, first commandment, second commandment. No false gods. There's one God. So it angers him, and he sold them into the hands of Cushan Rishathaim, who is the king of Aram Naharaim. So this king was one of the first kings of the Canaan, which is located in